But one group that doesn't always get a chance to get on the air is the Defenders Association of Philadelphia. You know them as public defenders. If you cannot afford an attorney, these are the people that are your attorney. And that is led by a woman named Keir Bradford-Grey. She's the chief defender for the Defenders Association in Philadelphia. We have made history in Philadelphia. For the first time ever, there is an African-American woman who is the DA of the city, and there is an African-American woman who is the chief defender. It is nice to have Keir Bradford-Grey on our program. I haven't spoken to her for a while. Keir, thank you very much for being with us on Reality Check.
Thank you for inviting me. I always enjoy being on this show with you, Vince.
Well, I do appreciate it. I do appreciate that. Well, let's ask. There is a new district attorney. It is Kelly Hodge. Looking for good things from her, even on the opposite side?
So it's interesting that you say on the opposite side. I think of when you're at these top levels of the criminal justice systems organizations and you're looking at everything from a very visual vantage point where you can see a vision for your system, if you will. You look forward to working with reasonable-minded people. You may not agree on everything, and of course, the things that we don't agree on, they play out in the natural justice systems process. But I think, like I always say, you can fight in the courtroom, but work it out in the boardroom. And I'm looking forward to sitting down with a very fair-minded person so we can make sure that we're working together to have a system, no matter what organization you run. Every city wants a justice system that is fiscally responsible, meaning that we use taxpayer dollars wisely, that is fundamentally fair, meaning that there's not bias that interplays in a lot of the decision making so that one community is impacted far more greatly than another. And lastly, that we promote public safety. We want to make sure that we're not making people more desperate, and we're using our system to deal with those who really cause a threat and danger to our society.
So can really the new DA put a lot of things in place in 5 months? I mean, you've come into an office. You need some time to take what was old in the defender's office and change it. She's only got 5 months. And come January of next year, everything that she puts in place could be wiped out by either Democrat Larry Krasner, if he's elected, or Republican Beth Grossman. How does she put systematic change in that will last past the DA's tenure?
Well, I think we should look for her to be more of a person that's making inquiries and understanding what's going on, bringing to light things that a person that sits in that top level seat will have to spend months and months and months investigating. I mean, that's what it takes. They have an office of 600 people, 600 plus people. You don't just go in there and make policies, right? You've got to talk to people. You've got to make the inquiries like you love to do, right? Make the inquiries that get you to the answers or the solutions that you want. And then you present those in a nice like white paper to the next person in leadership. That's a huge help because if you don't start identifying those things that you can really focus on, the next person is going to spend that much more time doing it as well, especially someone who's unfamiliar to the DA's office if Larry Krasner is the one that gets in.
Let me ask, have you gotten a sense, because you're on the opposite side of the DA's office, that morale is starting to improve? Because when I spoke to assistant district attorneys, they were really shell-shocked about the fact that Seth Williams, their DA, was indicted for all of these kind of nefarious, and sundry things, taking tickets and couches and all this other stuff. Do you see that? Was there a morale loss in the DA's office? And have you seen just in the last couple of weeks that things have gotten better?
So, I mean, I can imagine there would be a huge morale loss when your leader is demonized, whether it's his own making or something else. I mean, that's just, I can imagine my staff having to live under the shadow or the cloud of me having this negative impact on the office. I do have some friends and friendships with the DAs, and I do see optimism in what's to come. I think that a lot of people were very proud, including myself, of Kelly Hodge's appointment, and that it was something that's to be said that we're done with the bureaucracies and we want to do the right thing. We want to put the right people in the right places. And I'd say this, Kelly is a very fair-minded, reasonable person. As you've just seen, I think her interview was really good. When you put someone who's a born leader in a role, they're going to do what it takes to make sure that they make the impact that they want. And that's what I think people are looking forward to. Now, it is a little up in the air because no one really knows. Well, I mean, you have an inkling that, a Democrat may win. But then again, these negative narratives about, oh, well, this Democrat come in and, not prosecute violent crimes. You have that narrative, which is absurd, in my opinion, because no one runs for DA and not thinks that they have to prosecute violent crimes. But this narrative permeates the general public, and then the fear takes over. And so the reaction-based, actions take over. And, it may lend itself to a Republican candidate, Beth Grossman.
We're speaking to Keir Bradford-Grey. She's the chief defender for the Defenders Association of Philadelphia. That's the public defenders organization here. You're listening to Reality Check here on 900 AM and 96.1 FM, WURD Radio. I'm Vincent Thompson, filling in for Charles Ellison. Ms. Bradford-Grey, what are the major criminal justice issues impacting the city today? What are the things that, you're having to deal as a public defender because people don't have money to do it? Is it drugs? Is it guns? Is it black-on-black crime when it comes to just shooting people? And let the record show that black-on-black crime is the only kind of crime. I mean, white folks, they're shooting white folks. It's white-on-white crime. But, we lose. Most of the people who are shot and killed in this city are black folks, and many of them are black people. So what are the major crime issues that are impacting the city that's going to go even past whoever's the new DA? You see it on the ground every day. What is it that impacts us?
I can tell you, majority of the cases that we see that flood the criminal justice system are drugs and mental health related types of cases. People who have mental illness, and as a result, they may act in violent eruptions. They may do things that, are a threat to safety. The crime and the violence with the guns, they're there. They're prevalent. However, it's not as much in terms of percentages as we see with the drug epidemics. We didn't hear about the drug epidemics before. We used to have 40 cases a day of drug users, and you wouldn't hear anything. When I was practicing as an attorney in 1999 to 2007 at the Defender Association, we didn't hear about it. It was basically crack. They got into the methamphetamines after a while. But now that we see this devastation across all genres, all races, all wealth backgrounds.
With opioids.
Yes.
The exposure.
Now the exposure to the seriousness of drug abuse and drug addiction is coming to light. I would say that one of our main issues with our criminal justice system is that we have broadened the net so much that sometimes we don't have the time to focus on the major cases. Mm-hmm. So even in the DA's office, their caseloads are huge as well. But because they prosecute so much, they accept so many of the police officers' arrests that they, keep our caseloads pretty much, I guess,
high.
Yes,
right.
Very high, and we will stay in our positions because we always have something to do. If we started to narrow the net, I think that people could focus on the cases that need the attention that they deserve.
So what's the biggest problem in our city? Is it opioid abuse and the devastation that comes out of that? Because remember, when drugs were hitting the black community, there was attention, but not as much attention now, because now it seems like there's an opioid commission and we've got to invest money. So in the city right now, what is the biggest driver of crime and violence? Is it guns? Because I've got neighborhoods that will call me on the phone and say, I'm fearful, I can't go out at night, people getting shot, young people can get a gun as easy as, they can buy it out of a trunk of somebody's car. Or is it drugs? If you had to... You were in charge of criminal justice in this town. What's the first things we need to tackle?
Well, I would definitely tackle the crime or the gun violence, right? Because that, there's 10 drug users on every block. They don't necessarily interfere with everyone's lives. But when someone gets shot on your block, that rattles the entire neighborhood. And I would say that is it. But, of course you can't start at the back end. And, the things that we see, our office, we don't just represent people who are charged with crimes. We also represent children who are abused and neglected. What we see there is lack of access to health care so that they can get the necessary treatment, mental health stability that they need. The health care access is horrible. You've got babies that are addicted to drugs that are not getting the types of treatments that maybe others will get. You also got kids that are misdiagnosed all the time. You look in their background and they've been physically abused, beaten, sexually abused, mentally abused, right? And they're they're given a label of ADHD. So they're treated with medication for ADHD, but no one gives them a label of PTSD, which is
post-traumatic stress
yes,
syndrome.
because they don't recognize that in these kids, right? They recognize it if you go off to war or if you have some real life-startling event. But these youth have been dealing with behaviors that should never be inflicted upon any young kid. And I have children of my own. I could imagine how trauma filled that my child would be if he'd suffer physical abuse on a daily basis. What do you think? Who do you think those kids are going to grow up to be? You know, those are the kids that grow up to be less empathetic. They don't have a future vision and hope. And I heard the DA Hodge say, you know, her life was always deemed to be limitless. Well, these kids don't have that. That's the reality. And if we don't start talking about criminal justice reform and starting at the child welfare system and putting all of the money that we can to make sure that those kids are not suffering the collateral damage of what's been happening to them, they are going to grow up and be plagued.
So what changes are we seeing in criminal justice? Some of them aren't being seen publicly, but we're seeing less people in our city's prison system. We know that there is talk of a lot of changes, possibly bail reform. Mm-hmm. What is the changes happening? And if the changes are happening where there's less people in prison, what does that mean? Because I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Somebody commits a crime on my block, right? Mm-hmm. You know, I want them to go to jail. Now, automatically. Like, and that's what a lot of people think, right? Right. That's what a lot of people think. Now, I know that there is talk of giving more people ankle bracelets and monitoring and keeping them at home. But how do you deal with the perception that, wait a minute, I just got this guy off my block. Now he's back on my block. And even though he's got an ankle monitor, that doesn't make me feel safe. Like how does that, are we seeing a lot of blowback because of the things that are being implemented, I guess, with the help of the Kenney administration and others? How do you balance that?
I'm so glad you asked that question. Okay. So what we're doing is we're carefully looking at who should be in jail and who does not need to. Like I said, we need to have a system that is fiscally responsible. So when you're looking at people that are in jail, people go to jail for a lot of different things. They go to jail if I had a fight with you, an argument with you, and we had a fist fight, I can go to jail, right? Many people get in fist fights. They don't go to jail for that. I think that we have to look at, are these people going to stay locked in the jail or are they coming back? Because how long can people stay in jail for certain offenses? And we have used jail as the first resort most of the times versus, you know, somewhere that we would get to if behavior keeps escalating. When we look at what we're doing with the jail population, if a lot of minority, low-income people are in jail beyond 30 days, they lose a lot of things that keep them stable.
Jobs, right, things like that.
Jobs, housing, mental health medication, right? Treatment. So do we want to bring people in jail for 30, 45 days just to teach them a lesson and make them more desperate so that they're worse when they come back to our community? Or do we want to teach them a lesson in more creative ways that doesn't necessarily involve locking you in behind a jail cell, keeping you away from some of these things, but you can still have the harsh realities of your actions being dealt with in a way that's better for us as a community. And so what we're doing in the criminal justice system right now is looking at who are we putting in our jail cells. And we found that 62% of our jail is filled with pretrial detention.
And that's 60% of city jails.
City, yes, Philadelphia. Right. Pretrial detention. These are people that they've been charged but never been convicted of anything.
Because they can't afford bail, right?
Yes, many of them cannot afford bail. And so what we're noticing is that their public benefits are turned off. So you let them out, they've got no house to go to. Where do you think they're going? What do you think they're doing? You know, they got no job. What do you think they're doing? I mean, these are things that have to be balanced upon our need for retribution, right? Because I think as we go on in society, we become more of a punitive society. And how's that working out for us? I think you asked the question, we're not any safer. We've used jail as the mechanism, and we'll try jail 7, 8, 9 times with no regard to whether or not it works in teaching people a lesson. But we'll keep doing it because it makes us feel safer without regard to whether or not we are safe.
So what do we need to do as a city of Philadelphia to help lower crime? Is it the public getting involved in their neighborhood and in their block? How does that work? Because, you know, people hire the police and say, listen, that's their job. I'm not going to go out here and try to stop no drug dealer because they got guns. I'm not going to do that. But what do we need to do as a collective, as a city, as the black community, to make our neighborhood safer? Because I've always been a believer that if you're going to improve your neighborhood, you outnumber the bad people in your neighborhood. You have to stand up because, the people that stay in the dark, they get treated badly.
Right.
What do you think?
I think you're right. You absolutely outnumber the people that have a lot of problems, the severe problems that will plague our neighborhood. I think what we definitely need to do is we need to take some of the matters in our own hands. The police can't solve all of our problems. Neither can the DA, and neither can the mayor. We have to understand our own makeup and our own, what goes into the dynamics that we had when we were growing up.
So I just want to make sure, when you say take things in our own hands, what specifically do you mean?
So specifically, we're doing a thing, our office is doing something called Participatory Defense, right? And what that means is that you take the power that you have in your hands and help create better outcomes for yourself. So if we're fighting hard for you to be out of jail, show up to court, be responsible. And if you can't be responsible, then other neighbors who say they want better from our system, use the skills you have and work with individuals. Some of these people have developed habits over years, and it's not just going to stop just because a police had an encounter with them. But I think we need to start being a sense of community, have more of a sense of community and saying, okay, working with people like my office that says, look, here are some of the problems here. When we have kids, there may be a nuisance factor in this neighborhood that they all gather and galvanize around. And when they gather and galvanize without any supervision or structure or anyone to say, hey, I have something better for you to do productively, they're going to be left to their own vices. You don't have a lot of that. I'll tell you one of the things that we really need to do in terms of these youth are really lost and the ones that are more likely to kill or be killed.
And we're talking about young teens, right?
Teens,
okay.
And I would say 17 to 24, right? That age, that the brain development and science has said they still haven't matured.
And it's mostly boys, not girls.
Mostly boys, right. We have a unique population coming out of prison. They call the juvenile lifers, right? Those are people that made the same mistakes and were born and grew up under the same circumstances as some of these young kids. Why aren't we using them for mentoring? These people have grown out of their own thinking, understood what went wrong, and have changed their ways in order to be more structured. They are even taught and trained to be mentors in the prison. But we can't get them to work with our youth that are in this sector, which is called focused deterrence. I don't know if you've heard that before, but it's
I think people, yeah. It's inside baseball term.
Right. And focused deterrence is an initiative to target those kids that are either going to kill or be killed in certain neighborhoods. But it's not just meant to be a hammer. You have to actually work with them. And if you don't want to have the patience or the empathy or whatever to work with them because you think, what they did, they need to be locked up, well, you're misguided because everyone has done something that could be construed in certain ways, but we just are given a chance based on our structures or our support systems.
We're going to take a break right now. We're speaking to Keir Bradford-Grey, Chief Defender for the Defenders Association of Philadelphia. For many people, they know them as the public defenders. We've been talking about crime and violence in the city and the role of the new district attorney, Kelly Hodge, who was in our studios, and the role of the next DA. In January. We're going to bring Keir back. The rest of the show, we're going to have the state treasurer, Joe Torsella, come on. And we also are going to have our Philadelphia Citizen segment, we hope, with writer Quinn O'Canlan. And also we're going to bring in some community folks, Pete Wilson from the 6th Ward and a representative of the Philadelphia Community Outreach Committee to talk about what's happening on the ground. You talked about people having to get involved, Kira, in their neighborhoods. Well, we're bringing some neighborhood folks in to find out what they're doing. And we're going to talk to them on a reality check. So stay tuned. We're on until 7 o'clock. You're listening to WURD Radio, 96.1 FM, 900 AM. We'll be back in just a moment. We're here having the final seconds with Keir Bradford-Grey. She's the Chief Defender for the Defenders Association of Philadelphia. And as soon as we're done, we're going to go right to the State Treasurer, Joe Torsella. There's a lot of things going on in the state budget that we want to get Mr. Torsella to talk to us about. Ms. Bradford-Grey, final question to you. What are some of the things that people should look for in the future from the Defenders Association when we look at all these issues, and some of the issues that's going to impact the next district attorney, no matter who that person is, whether it's Larry Krasner or Beth Grossman? What are some of the things?
Well, some of the things that we are going to do is start working with communities who are directly impacted and helping them to help us achieve better outcomes. And by doing that, there's a whole host of things we're going to do, but it's wrapped up in an initiative called Participatory Defense. That touches on more than just your criminal case. It touches on how to speak up for what you need. When we, and me particular, I am very, very interested in reducing racial bias in our system. I mean, that is my goal, my purpose. It does not make me feel good to see African American youth being thrown in detention centers in record numbers where other kids are not given those types of considerations or are given better considerations. And so bringing that balance, collecting the data that needs to be collected so that we can have an honest, an intelligent conversation is something that I'm really, I got my son over there, so I can't say the word I want to say,
Okay.
but I'm going to strive for. But what you can see is our office getting out in those communities and really discussing the issues and helping communities come up with their own solutions to some of their problems. Because some of it is really quite simple if you put it to them in a simplistic way.
And if people want to get in touch with your office, what's the website? What's the phone number?
Well, we have our social media page, and that has everything on it. But you can just type in Defender Association of Philadelphia, and it can bring up all of our mediums. So that our website, our social media pages, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. The phone number is 215-568-3190. If you want to call our community engagement person, his name would be Jose Loya. He is really helping us to put this together. We've been working for a while, for the past year, trying to get it right, and we're about ready to roll it out.
If there's any way that we can help at WURD Radio, just let us know.
You already know you can.
You know, so I expect to hear the Chief Defender twisting my arm and calling me for help. Again, if you want information about the Defenders Association, 215-568-3190. Madam Chief Defender, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.